Ya'at'e, welcome to the ICT Newscast. I'm Polly Dinette-Claw. We start in New Mexico, where a new law guarantees the right for Native students to wear regalia at graduations and other school events. The law passed unanimously through both chambers of the legislature and was recently signed by the governor. It prohibits schools from banning culturally significant clothing or objects. The law comes after a New Mexico student was ordered to remove an eagle plume from her graduation cap last year. The state's Secretary for Indian Affairs, Josette Monette, says it's important that students be free to celebrate their heritage and culture, and wants New Mexico to be a positive example for the rest of the nation.
I always say that New Mexico should be at the forefront of what's going on in Indian country across the entire country. And so, with 18 other states with similar laws in place to protect this right for Native students, we thought it was appropriate for New Mexico to do the same.
Family, friends, and colleagues gathered to honor the life and legacy of U.S. Congressman Raúl Grijalva, a man of the people, an ally to tribal nations, and a man who many say never forgot his roots. ICT's Daniel Herrera Carbajal has more.
People laughed and shared stories inside of the El Casino ballroom. This wasn't a wake with insider voices and a melancholic tone. This was a celebration of life for Arizona Democratic Congressman Raúl Grijalva, who died March 13th from cancer treatment complications at the age of 77. Hundreds of people, from tribal leaders to Grijalva's constituents, packed the ballroom to celebrate his accomplishments. People danced under a disco ball, shaking the floor to Grijalva's favorite songs, while a slideshow played in the background showcasing moments of his life as a husband, grandfather, and advocate. Pascua Yaqui tribe chairman Julian Hernandez said Grijalva's work for the little people inspired him to pursue politics.
The empowerment that he had, the advocacy and voice that he had, kind of gave me the strive to kind of go into politics. So the power that he had with the voice and advocacy that he spoke about, speaking for the workers, for the people that needed the voice.
During his time in Congress, Grijalva became one of the most vocal defenders of Native American issues in the U.S. House of Representatives. Grijalva served Arizona's 7th Congressional District. It spans from Tucson to the edges of Phoenix. His funeral was held prior to his celebration of life at St. Augustine Cathedral in downtown Tucson. Hundreds of mourners, including congressional and tribal leaders, packed the church. Former Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland recalled his dedication to tribal nations.
He was unwavering in his work to protect our air, land, and water, and a powerful advocate for tribal communities everywhere.
Later at the celebration of life, Pascua Yaqui Vice Chairman Peter Yucapicio spoke about Grijalva's work, advocating not only for his tribe, but for all the people.
When he walked for all of us. When he fought for all of us. The preservation of the language, the preservation of their lands, and their ancient ways of belief. Every tribe has a uniqueness about themselves and must be respected as for not only their sovereignty, but the way they celebrate life itself. Today we are here to celebrate his life because it was truly a life that included Latinos, all kinds of races, African Americans, the Europeans, the tribal members like me, a Yaqui, a Tono O'odham, Apache.
Pascua Yaqui and American Legion Post 125 honored Grijalva and his family with the banner for everyone to sign. Pascua Yaqui Councilwoman Herminia Frias cited the old Pascua Community Land Acquisition Act, which Grijalva introduced in Congress in 2021.
Something that people kept telling us is not going to happen. But having someone like Raúl in D.C. that made it happen for us is just speaks to the volume of his work, what he did, and how he got things done.
The act solidified an agreement that allowed lands to be taken in a federal trust on behalf of the Pascua Yaqui tribe. Grijalva championed a multitude of indigenous issues, introducing the repealing existing substandard provisions, encouraging conciliation with the Tribes Act to require federal consultation with tribal governments on matters impacting their communities. He introduced the Save Oak Flat from Foreign Mining Act as part of his efforts to safeguard lands for future generations by opposing the proposed resolution copper mine at Oak Flat. His work impacted indigenous communities so much it left Yucapicio wondering who would pick up where he left off.
Who's going to fight like he did? Who's going to be there for the people? The people's champ, we used to call him. Hopefully somebody will step up and do the same thing that he was doing. In Yaqui we say, Enchimampotawak. which means it's now in your hands.
For ICT News from the homelands of the Tonawatom, Daniel Herrera Carbajal.
The 21st Annual State of the Tribes Address was held at the Wisconsin State Capitol, representing the state's 11 federally recognized tribal nations. St. Croix Tribal Chairman Thomas Fowler delivered the speech, which tackled issues such as tribal sovereignty, education, environmental threats, and public health. ICT and PBS Wisconsin reporter Erica Aesi was there.
Hello and welcome.
St. Croix Chippewa Indians of Wisconsin Chairman Thomas Fowler addressed the full legislature.
My grandparents, great-grandparents, and ancestors knew that a positive relationship between tribes and the state and federal governments could only strengthen our communities.
Fowler said the trust responsibilities to the tribes require the government to uphold its commitment to protect Native land and Native rights, and asked for more support for the state's 2 reservation-based colleges.
St. Croix is in an educational desert, and our kids won't all find success moving so far from home, away from their support systems and culture.
Among other provisions affecting K-12 schools currently before the legislature, Fowler urged passage of a bill permitting Native students to wear traditional clothes during public school ceremonies.
We ask that this body supports legislation that serves our students, like AB 998, SB 85, so that school boards and charter schools don't prohibit American Indian students from wearing traditional regalia at a graduation ceremony.
Apache Danforth, member of the Oneida Nation, was in attendance. She also applauded the legislation, saying it's time for Wisconsin to follow the lead of other states.
You know, many are the first ones graduating from high school in their family, so wearing the traditional regalia really honors that tradition of accomplishment.
On the environment, Fowler called for a unified voice between the state and the tribes over the transport through their lands of oil and gas.
Tribes have never been silent on their concern of the environmental hazards that come with pipelines. Our lands and waterways are at risk, putting our food, water, medicine, cultural practices at risk too.
As Fowler spoke to environmental protection, including the need to address climate change, Jonas Hill, member of the Oneida Nation, called the message impactful.
Climate change is real. We're seeing the effects. Maple season is in full effect right now, and the sap is running slow. Duly because we haven't had a real hard winter hit us for some time. The wildlife and trees all depend on the environment.
Fowler's address touched on many difficult issues, including opioid addiction in Wisconsin's Native community, and as one prescription, called for the legalization of medical marijuana.
We need medical marijuana for chronic pain management, epilepsy, post-traumatic stress, and addiction. Addiction has left no family untouched in Indian country.
For her part, Danforth said such legislation should proceed with caution.
I really encourage them to think about our kids when they're looking at legislation and legalizing cannabis in our state, and how they're protecting our children from abusing and using and having access to cannabis.
On a most essential issue of life and death among the tribal community, Fowler called missing and murdered Indigenous women a public health crisis.
This is too common for our people, and it must stop.
Danielle DeLong of Ho-Chunk Nation echoed the call and beseeches the state task force on the missing and murdered to focus its attention.
There are so many disproportionate numbers to our missing and murdered Indigenous relatives, and that task force needs to be prioritized with funding.
Fowler's address itself brought into sharp focus the concerns of life and land, health, and the future for tribes across Wisconsin, reminding the audience that fully realizing tribal sovereignty and self-governance is possible by working with governments and administrations.
Tribal nations seek common sense policy reforms that strengthen our ability to govern and protect our own people and preserve our own cultures and control our own lands and resources within our own boundaries. Because tribes are not children of the government.
From Madison, I'm Erica Isi with Here and Now and ICT.
We'll hear more about the priorities for Wisconsin tribes later in the newscast. In Washington, D.C., there is confusion over the status of two California national monuments created by former President Joe Biden. This comes after a post on the White House website hinting at the monument's termination. The post was later removed. Now, tribal leaders who fought for the protections want answers. Stuart Huntington has more.
In one of his last official acts, Biden created the Chuckwalla and Satitla Highlands National Monuments, one in Southern California and one in the north. Trump's threats to them are not surprising. He campaigned on developing public lands.
And we will frack, and drill, baby, drill.
Pitt River tribal leaders fought for decades for Satitla and take a long view.
We're constantly dealing with this. It's so it's sometimes you just like can't let your guard down.
We're not going anywhere. Our journey has been about educating administrations, many administrations, about the importance of this area. So, we're ready to engage with this new administration as well. We see this back and forth trying to make it a Biden versus Trump situation. It's not a Biden versus Trump situation. It's a tribally led initiative
to protect Satitla, whose mountains and high plateaus are sacred to the Pitt River, Modoc, and other tribes.
Hey, we see Skripwacho, Dindapai, Ituni Isilo Zakate Gabala Malokmi. So in English I said, High One, help us protect our ancestral land today and tomorrow.
The highlands are home to vast underground springs of clear, fresh water.
Millions and millions of gallons, thousands and thousands of springs out there that feed into the creeks, which feeds into a few of these rivers.
And what do the highlands protect? The Sacramento River. It's a major source of water for California's massive farm economy and fresh drinking water for residents of the San Francisco Bay Area. Which is one reason Pitt River isn't alone in wanting to protect the highlands.
We literally have a very diverse, support base for the Satitla Highlands National Monument. And two, this area where it is a very Republican area.
We have similar values with the hikers, with the deer hunters, with the fishermen, with snowmobilers. We all have the same value of respecting the land, like something for the future, for our grandchildren. Let's protect this.
A positive note for tribal leaders? A single reference from Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, who told the National Congress of American Indians that he wanted to open some public lands, but not all.
Those assets are out there in public lands, and I'm not talking about our most precious places. I'm not talking about our national parks or national monuments. I'm not talking about any of that.
Still, no one is counting chickens.
Protecting Satitla is not only important for the sacredness of the area for the tribal people and the region, but the state and the world as a whole as an intact buffer to climate change to help save us all.
For ICT, I'm Stuart Huntington from the homelands of the Pitt River Tribe.
ICT reached out to the White House and the Department of Interior. Neither responded. Wisconsin tribes spoke directly to state lawmakers about the issues facing their communities. ICT's Shirley Snaby spoke with Jacob Reynolds, who is St. Croix Chippewa Indians, that helped craft this year's message during the State of the Tribes address.
Jacob Reynolds is an intergovernmental affairs for the St. Croix Chippewa Indians of Wisconsin. I want to welcome you to the ICT Newscast, Jake.
Pleasure to be here.
You were at the speech, and I understand you had a hand in crafting the message.
We had a lot of input from a lot of the tribes in the state, but it was very much meant to be a message for all of Indian country, really. We were able to get a lot of information in his speech and have him deliver it in a way that was full of conviction and full of confidence, and not necessarily trying to scold, but allowing people to really hear his words.
Well, how would you characterize the relationship between the tribes? I understand there's 11 tribes in Wisconsin, the tribes and the state. How's that relationship?
I think for a while in the 80s, it was very strained, and a lot of work was done to try and build that relationship and really take it to that upper echelon of willingness to work together. And I know the current governor that we have, Tony Evers, has done a great job on really making the tribes feel important and really understanding exactly what sovereignty means at that level. And he's done a great job recognizing a lot of things, especially when it comes to funding and just willingness to support the tribes in a lot of their initiatives. So he's done a really great job.
What are some of the initiatives that he's supported that are important to the tribes?
Well, he's helped a lot with the DOT signs and getting actual community names in Ojibwe and whatever language some of the tribes may speak. He's done things as far as, I know us personally, we've received a $4.5 million grant to basically take our existing tribal center, which was built in 1972, I believe, and repurpose it into an educational center, library, a safe space for our elders to come up here and spend time.
St. Croix, like many of the tribes in Wisconsin, are known for your natural resources, from the sugar bush to your fishing. And do you see any opportunities with the state, or are there still some threats that you see to your lands?
We are in a crucial stage right now where it's really starting to get to that tipping point of whether or not we're going to allow ourselves to continue trying to walk down this path of destroying everything around us, or trying to work with the state and the federal government the best we can to protect everything that we can. Try and drive home exactly how important that all of those things are. I mean, it's not just for us. We were taught our whole lives to think for those next 7 generations. And we have that ability right now. And if we don't take those chances and take the opportunities that we have to try and fix this or stop it from going as far as it is, it's only going to get worse. And then everybody is going to be punished for that. And that's just, we can't do that. We're not just fighting for Indian country here. We're fighting for all of Wisconsin. We're fighting for all.
One of the other things that Chairman Fowler addressed was substance abuse. And, unfortunately, that's just something that's not going away in our communities. But you've got an idea to alleviate some of that.
As a recovering alcoholic myself, I know the effects of what addiction actually does. And the chairman said it best in the speech, addiction has left no family untouched in Indian country. And I hate that that's such a truth. I hate that we have to have that stated for people to understand what it is that we go through and how we deal with it. Some of us were never shown any other way. But this is a way now if we can start trying to treat the actual issues, if we can start trying to treat what is afflicting people, then we have a possibility on stopping the dependency and stopping the addiction and treating people properly. And the ways that we do that is we need to expand IHS funding. We need to expand mental health services. We need to expand addiction elimination and control. And some of the ways that we can do that is through medicinal cannabis, which can alleviate a lot of studies have shown in states where it is legal, there's been a decrease of 26% in opioid dependency to treat just common ailments. And it's been a practice used by tribes for generations. It's not something new. It's not something that is coming around. More so, it's being a medicine that has been used for thousands of years. And we're rediscovering now how that medicine can help our people. We know right now there's an illicit market for this, right? It's happening everywhere. The issues are some of these illicit markets are being contaminated with other drugs right now. The more that happens, the more dangerous this gets for people just trying to reach out for different ways to deal with any afflictions they might have. We have the ability right now to regulate this properly to ensure safety for every individual that may be reaching out and using this and getting this off of the illicit market.
Well, thank you, Jacob Reynolds, for joining us on the ICT Newscast.
A pleasure to be here, and thank you for asking.
As we wrap up Women's History Month, we head to Maine to meet Theresa Secord, a Penobscot basket maker who's preserving her family's traditions and passing them on to the next generation.
Meet Theresa Secord. She's an award-winning Penobscot basket maker and honors her ancestors through her work. Her son, Caleb Hoffman, takes it to the next generation.
Diliwes Tala Secord, Penobscot, Bizanadakat. And it basically said, I'm Theresa Secord, I'm a Penobscot basket maker.
I want to talk to you about growing up in Maine and how were you inspired to make baskets?
It's kind of interesting. I have to talk a little bit about the demographics in that my mother was born, she was the last person in our family born on the Penobscot reservation at Indian Island, Maine, which is an ancient winter village of the Penobscots. It's literally an island in the Penobscot River about 150 miles north of Portland. And I realized when later I went to live on the reservation and work for my tribe that a lot of my friends there, Passamaquoddy and Penobscot, our mothers went to nursing school in Portland. But we retained a long connection and strong connection to the family on Indian Island. My mother's parents still lived there when I was growing up, and so I got to visit there quite a bit in summers. Being the only girl out of 6 kids, I was the preferred one to go and visit because my brothers were really quite a handful when they were young. And then my great-grandmother lived there too, and her siblings and her other, children, my grandparents' siblings. And so there's a large extended family that's still there. But I was able to see my great-grandmother making baskets, and I was really quite interested. But it wasn't accessible to me, living as far away as I did. And so it wasn't until I went to graduate school in the 1980s, I have a master's degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And the tribe called me up right after the Maine Indian land claims. Literally, in 1984, the land claims was 1980, and called up all of the tribal professionals earning degrees at that time. And we all came back to work for the tribe. Lawyers, foresters, I was the only geologist. So I ended up heading a big mineral assessment program on 300,000 acres of Passamaquoddy and Penobscot trust lands.
You got a degree in geology. What does that have to do with basket making?
Well, that's what brought me back to, finally work for my tribe, which I had always hoped to do. And at the same time, I'd always hoped to learn basket making, but it really wasn't as accessible to me. My great-grandmother was the last basket maker in my family, and she passed away when I was about 20. And so I was still in college then and headed off to grad school after that. So once I started living and working, living on the reservation and working for my tribe, I had access to some of the elders, really some of the last ones who are still practicing the basketry pretty regularly. And I actually met my teacher, the late, great Madeline Tomerche, in a language class. I was interested in trying to learn some of the Penobscot language, and she was teaching. And I soon learned that I was a much faster student of basketry than the language. And she took me on too, wanting to make sure that it continued. And then that was right around the same time I helped found, I think within 5 years, I helped found the Maine Indian Basket Makers Alliance with elders like her, because they wanted to do more. They saw that the tradition was disappearing in all 4 federally recognized tribes there. So the Penobscot, Maliseet, Passamaquoddy, and Penobscot, and Mi'kmaq nations.
Theresa Secord, thank you very much for joining me on the ICT Newscast, and happy Herstory Month.
What a pleasure. Willie one, Shirley.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.